During labor, when I was in unbearable pain, Julian abandoned me to stay by his mistress's side, just because she showed signs of premature contractions. As a result, my newborn daughter was placed in the neonatal ward immediately. He tried to comfort me, saying, "At least our daughter survived, right?" Grace had almost lost both her baby and her own life. Later, both my daughter and his mistress's son were trapped in a raging fire. Without hesitation, Julian rushed to save Grace's son first. And just like that, my baby girl was burned alive. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the very day the fire took her away from me. "Mommy, I went out to play with Brother Rowan." Lily's sweet voice pulled me out of my daze. She stood before me, cheerful, innocent, and full of life. Everything around me transported me back to that fateful day when the flames consumed my child. I had lost her completely. A gut-wrenching pain crushed my chest, making it impossible to breathe. I lunged forward, pulling Lily into my arms, my body trembling. "Baby, please don't leave me. I beg you." Her tiny hand patted my back gently, her voice soothing, filled with warmth. "Mommy, what's wrong? I'm not going anywhere. I'll stay home with you, Mommy. Don't cry, I will never leave you." Everything felt so real. I had been reborn. Fate had granted me another chance, allowing me to return to the moment before the tragedy. "Lily." Outside, Grace's son, Rowan, was calling for her. I tightened my hold on Lily, a fire igniting within my heart. On this day in my past life, Rowan had come over to play with Lily, and I hadn't thought much of it. Who could have known he would end up playing with fire? When the flames erupted, Rowan abandoned Lily, leaving her behind. Later, Julian risked his life to run into the fire. But the child he carried out wasn't our biological daughter, Lily. It was Grace's son, Rowan. A deep, seething hatred burned inside me. I glanced upstairs. Julian was in his study. I bent down and whispered to Lily, "Go tell Rowan you want to stay home with Mommy." Lily nodded her little head and ran to the door. "Brother Rowan, I'm not going out to play. I want to stay home with Mommy." "Fine, I'll go by myself." Lily ran back to me, her voice filled with concern. "Mommy, do you feel better now? Let me take care of you." I hugged Lily again, a deep warmth spreading through me. She was right here. Alive. Not like before. When the next time I saw her, she was nothing but a lifeless, charred body. So small. Quietly resting. I had collapsed to the ground that day, my heart shattered beyond repair. I had wished it was me instead. And Julian? Lily's biological father now stood with Grace and Rowan, embracing them as if they were the perfect little family. Fury overtook me. I rushed over, shoving them apart. "Julian, our daughter is dead. Lily is gone. And you're here acting like nothing happened. Why didn't you save her? She was your own flesh and blood." It was only then that Julian seemed to acknowledge my presence. His darkened face showed a flicker of something. Pain, perhaps? But it wasn't true grief. "Sophia, the dead can't come back. Maybe Lily and we were never meant to be." So that was it? Just an obligatory sadness? I raised my hand and struck him hard. "Julian, it should have been you who died." Rowan burst into tears. Julian scowled, his voice stern. "Sophia, you're scaring him." The murmurs around us grew louder. His daughter died, and he barely even reacts. It's obvious. That boy is his real child. I glared at Julian. But he merely turned away, carrying Rowan in his arms, whispering comforting words to him. Grace smirked as she glanced back at me. Then she leaned in, her voice dripping with cruelty. "Those people are right. Julian cares about Rowan too much. After all these years, Sophia. Haven't you ever wondered why?" I froze. She smiled wickedly. "Your daughter's death. It was for the best. Now there's room for Rowan. He needs a father too. A chill ran down my spine. Grace leaned even closer. I had Rowan start the fire. I told him to run after lighting it. Your daughter stole Julian's love from my son. It was only fair to take it back. My heart pounded in my chest. All these years, I had never doubted anything. And now, Grace had just confessed everything to me with a triumphant smirk. A wave of hatred surged inside me. I fell into despair. And Julian remained at Grace and Rowan's side. I wanted to die, to reunite with Lily. But I couldn't leave just yet. So, I called Julian. I told him to bring Grace and Rowan home. I said I wanted to talk, to settle things once and for all. That perfect little family came. I locked the door. Call the fire department quickly. I tore my gaze away from the garage and turned to Grace, who was already standing next to me. Why not call the police? I asked. Grace glanced toward the property management office. There's no need for that. We have a water truck in our complex. They'll be here soon. The firefighters should arrive quickly too, she added. After all, this is an elite neighborhood. Grace moved here with Rowan 2 years ago. I knew about her connection with Julian, but to me, they were just friends. As a mother, I understood that raising a child alone wasn't easy, so I helped Grace. But how did she repay me? I nodded. Yes, the firefighters will be here soon. The flames are getting bigger, Grace said anxiously. I hope no one is inside. Unlikely, I agreed. Unless someone got trapped. Grace suddenly laughed. I frowned, giving her a cold stare. She quickly composed herself. Sorry, I'm not being callous. It's just that if someone was inside, they would already be burned. Not necessarily, I replied. Mom. Lily's voice called out as she ran up to me. Is it true there's a fire? We should call 911. Lily. Grace interrupted sharply. Why are you home? Didn't you go out to play with Rowan? I picked Lily up and smiled slightly. I wasn't feeling well, so Lily stayed home. Rowan went alone. Grace's face paled. She was visibly panicking. I suppressed the strange satisfaction that crept over me and asked, where did Rowan go? Grace's terrified eyes darted toward the garage. Rowan! Rowan, please be okay, she cried and ran toward it. Only someone as reckless as her would let their child start a fire just to create an illusion of fatherly love. I turned to look at the house. A father like Julian? Better off without him. Julian must have gotten Grace's call because he rushed out shortly after. I stepped in his way, feigning concern. What's wrong? Julian stopped. Usually composed, he now looked shaken. There's a fire. I'm afraid someone might be inside. I need to check. I stepped aside with Lily. Go ahead. Then I called Alara to watch over Lily. She didn't need to see what was coming. As I moved forward, Julian had already run into the flames while Grace screamed for him to save Rowan. I stood at a distance, coldly watching everything unfold. Less than 10 minutes later, Julian emerged with Rowan in his arms. His face was blackened with soot, his hair singed, just like in my past life. Rowan was unconscious. His clothes were torn, his body covered in burns. Grace screamed and rushed forward. Rowan! You have to be okay. Please don't scare me, she whispered. How did this happen? I told you to run after setting the fire. What did you just say, Grace? Julian's voice was full of anger. Did you make Rowan start the fire? Grace froze for a moment but then started sobbing loudly. No, Tears streamed down her face. He's in this condition, and you're asking about that? Call an ambulance. Julian ordered, his gaze ice cold. If anything happens to Rowan, I won't let this go. The crowd began to disperse. Julian carried Rowan toward the car, with Grace following closely. I overheard neighbors murmuring. Poor boy. Miss Grace only has one child. If she loses him, she'll go mad. Only one? What about Julian? Look how much he cares for her and the boy. Yes, he's a good man. They look like a real family. Shoo! Julian's wife is here. Just then, Julian and Grace passed by carrying Rowan. Hearing the neighbors, Julian hesitated and glanced at me. Something flickered in his eyes. The neighbors quickly apologized. I smiled nonchalantly. It's fine. My husband has always taken care of Miss Grace and her son. He treats Rowan like his own. That's only natural, to help those weaker than us, right, dear? Julian narrowed his eyes slightly and nodded. You're right. Grace lost her composure. Julian, are you serious right now? Rowan is in danger. We need to go to the hospital. Julian gave me one last look before getting into the car with the unconscious child. Grace followed him inside. At dinner, Lily asked. Mom, aren't we waiting for Dad? Isn't he off today? I smiled, kissing her forehead. Sweetheart, Dad is busy. Isn't it nice being just the two of us? Then I want Mommy to always be with me, she said joyfully. I ruffled her hair. Let's eat. Watching Lily enjoy her food, my eyes filled with tears. Lily was still here. That was all that mattered. Julian didn't come home that night. And that was for the best. I held Lily in my arms, unable to sleep. Fear crept in. What if this was all a dream? What if I woke up and she was gone? But the next morning, she was still there. Real. I took her to school, watching her small figure disappear into the building, my heart feeling empty. But I knew this wasn't a dream. Lily was really back with me. I couldn't just stay by her side. I had so much to do for our future. Despite not sleeping all night, I was full of energy. As soon as I arrived at the office, Julian's assistant, Lucian, hurried over to me. Vice President, where is Julian? I can't reach him, and Henry from Hongguan is already here. I replied calmly. Julian had an unexpected situation and won't be coming to the office for a while. Just hand me the Hongguan project. Lucian frowned. But this project is very important to the president. It's one of the key deals this year. I let out a soft scoff. What? Do you think I'm not capable enough to handle it? Or do you doubt my abilities? Lucian panicked. Sophia, that's not what I meant. I didn't push further and instead called Grace. She finally answered after a long pause, her voice tired and laced with irritation. Sophia, why are you calling me? Are you happy about what happened to Rowan? In the past, I might have thought she was accusing me of something. But now I couldn't deny that I was pleased. Of course, I couldn't let it show. What are you talking about, Grace? Why would you say that? She seemed to realize her tone and softened it slightly. What do you want? Glancing at Lucian, I put on a concerned act. How is Rowan? Grace's response was curt. You were there too. Why are you asking me? The memory of Rowan being pulled from the fire flashed through my mind. His injuries were gruesome, almost sickening. But compared to what Lily suffered in my past life, it was nothing. I got straight to the point. Julian's assistant can't reach him. The company needs him. Tell him to take the call. There was a pause before Grace shouted through her tears. Sophia, right now, the most important thing is that Rowan survives. The company doesn't matter. I had the call on speaker, so Lucian heard everything. He immediately said, if the president can't come back now, then that's that. Rowan is more important. Grace hung up. I put my phone away and looked at Lucian coldly. You know Grace and Rowan, don't you? A flicker of guilt crossed his face. I've been working with the president for years. Miss Grace is his friend. So naturally, I know her. So, it wasn't just Julian and Grace keeping things from me. Lucian knew as well. And what about Julian's parents? They had been visiting Lily more frequently over the past 2 years, and each time they brought gifts, not just for her, but for Rowan as well. It's hard for Grace to raise a child alone, they would say. She grew up under our care, so we should help her when we can. A chill settled in my heart. After calming myself, I continued. You heard her. Julian is at the hospital with Rowan. He won't be meeting Henry. Just give me the Hongguan documents. Lucian nodded and went to retrieve them. As I reviewed the papers, my phone rang. It was Julian. Sophia. My phone just finished charging. Did you try to reach me? I answered plainly. Henry from Hongguan is here. Lucian came looking for me. I know you're with Rowan and can't leave, so I'll take over the Hongguan project. Are you sure you can handle it? His voice was heavy with exhaustion. Do we have another choice? Can you come back? How is Rowan? Julian hesitated before replying in a low voice. Sophia. His condition is really serious. I can't leave him right now. You do realize this project is worth billions, right? That's more important, don't you think? Julian wavered. Sophia, I really can't come back. So, you're staying for Rowan? He's in critical condition. The company is in your hands. Thank you for handling this. I sighed deeply. Fine. Sophia. Grace and I have been friends since childhood. I can't abandon her, especially with Rowan being so young. He and Lily were born on the same day. I cut him off sharply. Julian, are you even listening to yourself? You're using your own daughter as an excuse? That's not what I meant. Enough. I get it. You focus on Rowan. I'll take care of the company. I ended the call. He dared to bring up the fact that Lily and Rowan were born on the same day. Lily was born a month early. I had been extremely careful throughout my pregnancy. My parents even hired a medical team to monitor me. I followed every piece of medical advice meticulously. I remember that day so clearly. Julian's mother came over and made fish soup for me. Once it was ready, she called me downstairs to drink it. As I stepped down, I suddenly slipped and tumbled down the stairs. Blood pooled beneath me. Julian's mother only screamed in shock, while Alara, my maid, immediately called an ambulance and notified Julian. He arrived just as the paramedics were getting me onto the stretcher. And the first thing he did? He picked up the phone to check on Grace. She's showing signs of early labor, he said. She's alone. I need to be with her. I gripped his shirt tightly, trying to hold back the pain. Julian, please save our child. He looked at me, pried my fingers off his sleeve, and walked away without a second glance. This wasn't the first time he had prioritized Grace over me, his wife. At that moment, my heart shattered completely. Lily was taken straight to the neonatal unit. I lay in my hospital bed, unable to move. Julian came to see me the next day. Our eyes met, and I gave him a cold stare. He had the audacity to say, "At least our daughter survived, right?" Grace almost lost both of them. Every time I remember that moment, I want to slap him. And now I couldn't shake the thought. What if my fall wasn't an accident? Alara was someone I brought from home. She always made sure the stairs were dry after mopping. There was no way I could have slipped so easily. But there were no cameras in the living room back then. No way to prove anything. Still, deep down, I suspected Julian's mother. After I became pregnant, she had tricked me into going to Hong Kong just to find out the baby's gender. When she learned it was a girl, disappointment flashed across her face. At the time, I thought she simply preferred boys. Now, I wasn't so sure.
Now that I know Rowan is her grandson, I wonder if she didn't want Lily to be born from the very beginning, so everything Julian has would belong to her grandson. This matter is already impossible to verify. But in this life, I absolutely won't allow anything that belongs to Lily to be taken away by anyone, not even a little bit. In the afternoon, I picked up Lily from school and took her directly back to my home. I told my parents everything and asked them to find someone to help me investigate the details between Julian and Grace. Now, I only trust my parents. At the same time, I also found 4 people to keep an eye on Lily, just in case that crazy Grace tried to harm her. She had Rowan start a fire to try to kill Lily, and now her son was the one injured. I'm really worried that if she feels unbalanced, she might continue to harm Lily. With my parents helping me, at least I didn't have to be so tense, and I could focus a bit more on the company's affairs. After marrying Julian, I entered the Julian group. With the marriage between our 2 families, Julian's family gave me some shares, while my family also gave Julian some shares. My parents have already started to dilute Julian's shares in our family business. Meanwhile, I took the opportunity to acquire more shares in the Julian group, expanding my influence. On the 3rd day after Rowan was hospitalized, Julian came home. He looked significantly thinner, with dark circles under his eyes indicating his fatigue. I poured him a cup of hot tea. Is Rowan okay? I've been so busy these past few days that I haven't had time to visit him. Julian sat on the sofa, pinched the corners of his eyes, then took the teacup, saying only, "Just take care of the company, I'll handle things with Rowan." After saying that, he seemed to realize something and explained to me, "Grace is very vulnerable right now. She doesn't know what to do. If I don't help her, she might break down." I sighed, "She really is pitiful. You should help her, she is your friend." Julian didn't drink the tea, staring at me silently with a hint of scrutiny in his eyes. I asked in confusion, "What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that?" Julian put down the teacup, his gaze not leaving me. He asked, "I'm spending every day with another woman, and you seem completely unconcerned. How come?" "So what does he mean by that? Is he trying to make me jealous?" I laughed out loud. "What are you talking about? Grace is just an ordinary woman, right? She's your best friend. If I had any thoughts about her, that would be too unreasonable." Julian frowned slightly, his gaze wandering as if he were recalling something. He murmured, "But I remember you used to care a lot. Are you talking about my premature birth?" I let a hint of sorrow show on my face. "I was really sad about that. You actually left me to find Grace." Julian opened his mouth as if to explain, "But Lily and I are okay now." I smiled slightly. "You also said Grace almost had a double tragedy." I didn't want to discuss this with him any longer, it made me feel sick. "Julian, why don't you take a break and go take a shower? Don't you have to go to the hospital later? Grace can't handle it alone." Julian nodded. "I need to go." I thought Julian suspected me, otherwise, why would he ask why I had no thoughts about it? But as soon as he arrived at the hospital, he was caught up in things and had no time to deal with me or the company. My conversation with Henry went smoothly, and we quickly signed the contract. However, the project team was still Julian's people. I couldn't be too ruthless, I had to take things step by step. While I was struggling with how to disband the team, they gave me an opportunity. "This is the president's intention, I will absolutely follow the president's wishes." The troublemaker appeared. I smiled slightly. "But I'm the one in charge of this project now, and President Julian has entrusted the entire project to me." The person in front of me was someone close to Julian and clearly didn't take me seriously. "If that's how you feel, then I'll withdraw from this project. If you have someone to take my place, fine, if not, I can't do anything." I was waiting for him to say that. "I see you're not just trying to withdraw from this project, you want to leave the company too, right?" "I didn't mean that. I respect your choice. Go to the finance department to settle your salary, it'll be according to N+1. Don't worry, you've made a lot of contributions to the company. I won't let you suffer." After I said that, I lowered my head and stopped looking at him. "Sophia." I directly stood up with my folder and left, calling my assistant. "Let's have a meeting." Before the meeting was over, I received a call from Julian. His voice sounded even more exhausted as he asked me why I fired someone. "Did he tell you?" I felt wronged and angry. "Julian, I'm not only the vice president of the company, I'm also your wife. Your people don't take me seriously at all. Shouldn't you stand up for me? Or do you not take me seriously either? I didn't mean that. I didn't give Julian a chance to speak. Henry was really angry because you didn't show up at Hongguan. I barely managed to stabilize the project, and your people don't listen to me, saying that's how the president does things. Julian, why don't you come back? I won't take care of this project anymore. Just as Julian's voice sounded, Grace started to make a scene. Rowan has been crying in pain, and you're still on the phone. Are you even Rowan's father? Julian didn't let Grace finish her sentence. I can't leave the hospital right now. I'll rely on you for the Hongguan projects. After he finished speaking, he hung up the phone directly. That person was fired. But I wasn't that happy, it was just one person. And even if I fired everyone in the company, it would still belong to Julian. I needed to make the shareholders disappointed in him. Next, I fired a few more people, all of whom were Julian's confidants. He finally returned to the company. Rowan is temporarily stable. I'll handle the Hongguan project myself. You've worked hard during this time. I handed him the materials. You should have come back long ago. By the way, I fired a few more people. They didn't respect me. Of course, if you want them back, feel free. Although they don't take me, the vice president and your wife, seriously, I won't be responsible for this project anymore. Out of sight, out of mind. I didn't plan to bring them back, I spoiled them, Julian could only say. But I was quite surprised. I thought he wouldn't give me face. I'm going back to my office, Julian said as he walked out with the materials. I called out to him, Julian, let's take Lily out for dinner tonight. You haven't spent time with her in a while, she misses you. Julian turned around and nodded. That evening, I took Lily and Julian to Lily's favorite restaurant for dinner. Don't underestimate Lily, she's only 4, but she's quite picky with her food. Julian, wipe Lily's mouth, look at how messy she is, I said with a smile. Julian immediately took out a handkerchief and wiped Lily's mouth as she sat in her car seat. I clasped my hands under my chin, watching this scene with a beaming smile. This moment was captured, and the photo quickly spread everywhere, in newspapers and online. The next afternoon, during a meeting, Julian received a call from Grace. Julian, what do you mean? Now that my son is in bad shape, you're just going to ignore him, right? You're having a great time eating with your daughter, aren't you? Have you fallen for Sophia? You better come to the hospital right now, or I'll go to your company and let Sophia know that Rowan is your son. I'll be there right away. Julian hung up the phone, his face heavy, a storm cloud hanging over him. Although I didn't catch the specifics of what Grace said on the phone, I could guess. This was the reason I had someone take and release our family of 3 photo. Julian, where are you going? Henry is still here. If there's anything, I can finish my part and help you. Once I finish this project, I can let it go entirely. Julian looked at me silently for a while and sighed. Sophia, you should be the one in charge of this project. I gasped, pretending to be surprised and angry, raising my voice. Don't be ridiculous, Julian. Henry is still here, you're being so inconsistent. I thought that was enough. Henry's face did look quite displeased. Julian went over to apologize. Henry sneered, it's okay, President Julian. You must have important matters to attend to, so go ahead. Since the contract is signed, I can't just breach it, can I? Julian anxiously replied, Henry, I really have an urgent matter. I'm so sorry. Henry didn't speak to him again but turned to me and said, Sophia, let's continue. You wouldn't disregard this project, would you? How did you talk to me before signing the contract? I pretended to be troubled, but... Julian held my hand, his eyes pleading. Sophia, this project is really important. I'm begging you. All right then. As I watched Julian leave, I apologized to Henry and said many good words until he temporarily suppressed the anger in his heart. I seized the opportunity to say, Henry, Julian is Julian, and I am me. I feel very honored to cooperate with you. Not just with the Julian group. I hope you will take good care of our Genesis Digital in the future. Henry finally returned a smile. I almost forgot you are the successor of Genesis Digital. Your father has a capable daughter, I envy that. I breathed a sigh of relief. With Henry sorted out, he should stand on my side in the future. Rowan's infection worsened and he was sent to the ICU. Julian had been at the hospital for nearly half a month. During this time, he hadn't gone home. Lily had her grandparents with her, so she hadn't missed him much. I felt relieved. Even if Lily didn't have a father, the love she received wouldn't be any less. As for the company, I had already kicked all of Julian's people out of the project team. Those I could fire, I fired directly, and those I couldn't fire were given trivial tasks. I knew I was being a bit blatant, but Julian really couldn't get away from it right now. But there were still his parents. Julian's father returned to the company. As the chairman, he naturally held significant weight. He asked me about the project, and I answered one by one without any concealment. He certainly didn't come just for a mere project or a few fired employees. Finally, he said, recently, Julian has been away from the company. I heard you fired a lot of Julian's people. Sophia, we're all family. I won't beat around the bush with you. What you're doing will raise suspicion. The company is discussing that there is a crisis in your marriage with Julian and that you want to take over the entire Julian group. I laughed. Dad, do you really think I have the ability to take over the Julian group? Besides, my marriage to Julian is simply a union of interests. I even gave birth to a child for your Julian family. Julian has no other children, so the company will eventually belong to Lily. Do I need to take over right now? Dad, I'm not that short-sighted. Julian's father was silent for a moment before nodding. I continued, I know that in such a large company, it's better to have a son inherit it. So, I plan to compete with Julian for a son. As for Lily, I just hope she can live a carefree life. Hearing this, a smile appeared on his face. You're right, I also hope Lily can be less burdened. She is the little princess of the Julian family and should only be responsible for spending money. I found it amusing that he was so happy about having a son. After sending Julian's father off, I called my dad to ask how the investigation into Julian and Grace was going. I needed to obtain solid evidence of Julian's infidelity, so that I could launch a public opinion battle and pressure the company's shareholders to act. I was just about to call you, my dad snorted. Julian didn't do a paternity test, did he? I sensed something and felt a rush of excitement. Dad, can you be more clear? My dad sneered again. That Rowan isn't Julian's son at all. I'll send you the photos shortly. After hanging up, I received the photos from my dad. In the picture, Grace was showing off her pregnant belly, standing next to a man who wasn't Julian. My dad told me that Grace wasn't actually in premature labor, it was merely a facade for Julian. He had already sent someone abroad to find that man and have a paternity test done with Rowan. When this comes to light, let's see how he explains it to the shareholders. I thought for a moment and said, Dad, then let's make a scene together. Wait for my news. My dad spent some money to obtain Rowan's DNA profile. Comparing it with Julian's, it was indeed clear that they weren't father and son. Julian, oh Julian, he had truly made a fool of himself, just like I did in my previous life. I prepared myself and found time to visit Rowan. When I arrived at the hospital with a fruit basket and bouquet, Julian and Grace were arguing. Do you think that if I stay in the hospital, Rowan will wake up? What about the company? Am I just supposed to forget about it? Grace cried, you only care about the company. What about Rowan? I walked over. What's going on here? Julian's angry face flickered with panic as he shot a warning glance at Grace and immediately came to me. Sophia, what are you doing here? Why didn't you let me know? I haven't visited Rowan in the hospital all this time. I just found time today. I handed the fruit basket and bouquet to Grace. Sorry, Grace. Don't hold it against me. How is Rowan doing? Grace glared at me hatefully. You're here to laugh at my misfortune, aren't you? Why do you keep saying that? Why would I want to laugh at you? Julian immediately interjected, Grace, why are you speaking to Sophia like that? Only then did Grace calm down. I turned to Julian and said, you should go back to the company. I'll stay here and keep an eye on things. Grace and I are friends, and I should lend her a hand. Grace clearly didn't want Julian to leave. But Julian was too exhausted, both physically and mentally. His son was lying in the ICU, fighting for his life, and Grace had probably been arguing with him a lot during this time. During the sweet moments, everything was fine. But now it was just chaos. Julian left. Grace took a deep breath and coldly said, you can go, I don't need you. I scoffed, don't get it twisted. I just wanted to see if your son is still alive. Grace's eyes widened in shock. What did you say? You really shouldn't let a child play with fire. Is it because children don't have legal responsibilities for killing? But look at Lily, she's fine. Your son, on the other hand, should be dying, right? That's truly poetic justice, Sophia. Grace raised her hand to hit me. I grabbed her wrist and flung her hand away. You should save your energy for arguing with Julian. Your son is like this now. Do you think he cares about you two as mother and child? He actually cares about me and Lily now. TSK, a selfish man who created two families. Seeing that you're in trouble, he thinks of me again. How come men are so good at business? Grace's pupils shook violently. How do you know everything? Why do I know? Because I've died once, and Lily has died once too. This time, it has to be them. Grace, I won't let Julian come back anymore. He'll definitely listen to me because your son is finished. After I finished speaking, I turned and walked away. Grace screamed and lunged at me, but I turned around and pushed her to the ground. Coldly withdrawing my gaze, I strode away. I could hear Grace's furious shouts behind me, echoing endlessly. When I got back, I laid everything out for Julian. He gripped my arm tightly. Sophia, forgive me. From now on, I'll only be by your side and Lily's, okay? You can tell Dad that we should have another son. I know you still love me and don't want to separate from me. I promise you, I'll never see that mother and son again. I sneered inwardly. This man is truly selfish to the extreme. I thought he loved Grace and Rowan. It turns out, he only loves himself. Fine, I'll give you one chance. Julian really stopped going to the hospital. He even blacklisted Grace's number and had someone control her. He even wanted to drive Grace and Rowan out of the country, but my people secretly stopped him. My people even helped Grace get to Julian Group. Naturally, it caused a huge commotion. The media, having received the news, rushed over, and a grand drama unfolded. Julian, you're inhuman. You're ignoring your own son. All right, I'll let everyone see your true colors. Julian, you're nothing but a cheating scumbag. For so many years, you've been sleeping with me and refused to divorce your wife. I even gave birth to your son, and you said you would leave everything to him. Now that he's in trouble, you're going back to your wife and daughter. Julian had people restrain Grace and drive the media away. But the news still got out. The stock price of Julian Group plummeted, and I took the opportunity to acquire a lot of shares while telling my dad that Rowan's father should make an appearance. At this moment, I was in the shareholders' meeting. Julian's father sat at the front, his face serious. The shareholders were all speaking up. President Julian, you need to give us an explanation. Chairman, I propose to dismiss President Julian from all positions in the company. I just needed to watch. I didn't even have to say anything. Julian's dad was so angry that his chest heaved violently. Just then, more news came in from outside. Chairman, there's a man claiming to be Rowan's father. He demands compensation from President Julian for his son. After an awkward silence, Julian suddenly stood up. What? He stormed out. I immediately went to support Julian's dad. Dad, let's go take a look. At the company entrance, the media had surrounded them again. Rowan's biological father was shouting loudly, demanding that Julian compensate him for his son. Julian furiously questioned, Who are you? I'm Rowan's father. Oh right, the other main character should make an appearance now. I had Grace brought over. When she saw Rowan's father, she was startled. Griffin? What are you doing here? Griffin, with red eyes, charged at her and grabbed her hair. You motherfucker, give me my son back. It was you who said to use Rowan to get some money from Julian. Maybe the Julian group was supposed to be Rowan's, but now you've messed it up. Rowan is about to die, and you want my son back. He threw Grace to the ground, punching and kicking her, then charged at Julian. Give me my son back. Julian's eyes turned bloodshot. Grace. You motherfucker, you lied to me. Whose son is Rowan? Grace was crying uncontrollably, unable to say a word. The two men started fighting. Julian's dad was so shocked that he collapsed on the ground, convulsing. The scene turned chaotic. Julian's dad was sent to the hospital, having suffered a stroke and paralyzed. He could only sit in a wheelchair, unable to speak clearly and drooling when he tried to talk. The situation escalated. The entire Julian group became a national laughingstock. Not only did the stock price plummet, but the company was also scorned by people in the industry. Julian went mad, confronting Grace and Rowan's father, and finally figured out that Rowan was indeed not his child. At this moment, I stepped forward to file for divorce from Julian. He had cheated first, and I wanted custody of Lily. Julian refused to divorce, begging me for another chance. How could I possibly give him that chance? He vented all his anger on Grace, completely ignoring his own faults, and even directly hit and killed Grace and Rowan's father with his car. Then news came from the hospital that Rowan had passed away. Only after Julian was arrested did he calm down and start to regret it, saying he didn't mean to kill anyone, he just lost control out of anger. But the court's decision couldn't be swayed by just his words. The Julian group was in chaos, and I stepped up to take charge. Julian's mom cried and begged me, please don't divorce Julian. You're all we have left, otherwise, those shareholders won't spare us. I looked at her coldly. On the day I gave birth prematurely, it was you who sabotaged me on the stairs, wasn't it? Her face went pale. Whether you admit it or not is no longer important. You have nothing left now. I won't let Lily recognize you again. You should think about your future. As for your son? I smirked, he probably won't be able to support you in your old age. She lunged at me, but I pushed her away. She could only sit on the ground and cry. On my way out, I received a call from the police station saying Julian wanted to see me. I went. Julian was also injured, with a bandage wrapped around his head, still in a detention ward. When he saw me, he lunged at me but was stopped by the police. He no longer looked like his usual handsome self, his face was streaked with tears, truly disgusting. Sophia, I know everything. Is this because I didn't save Lily? Is that why you're treating me like this? I was taken aback. Julian had awakened memories from his past life. But so what? I sneered. Since you know everything, then just go die, clear as day. I turned and walked out. Behind me came Julian's cries. Sophia, I was wrong. I was wrong. I love you, Sophia. The reason I agreed to marry you is that I love you. I love Lily too. Don't worry, I'll be reborn as well. This time, I'll treat you and our daughter well. Julian was sentenced to death, his dad was still in the hospital, drooling. As for his mom, I had plenty of ways to deal with her. But I didn't. I decided to accumulate some virtue and just sent her to the countryside. I completely took over the Julian group, and I would lead it out of its predicament because it all belonged to Lily. After another tiring day, I returned home from work. Mom! Lily rushed over to hug me, looking wronged. Mom, Grandpa cheated. I glanced at the Monopoly game on the coffee table and then at my dad, helplessly pursing my lips. When I was a child, my dad taught me how to play mahjong, and once he taught me, he cheated. Now it was Lily's turn, and it was happening again. But thankfully, he hadn't taught Lily how to play mahjong. My mom and Alara came out of the kitchen. Stop playing and wash your hands for dinner. My dad reached over to hug Lily. Lily spread her arms. All right, I'll forgive Grandpa then. I watched as my dad took Lily to wash her hands, feeling warm inside. It was so nice. Everything should be like this. Everything should have been like this.